board.
Good morning, sir.
Everyone knows this is our beginning of our interview session. I'm going to introduce folks in the room. I'm sure you probably met most of these people. Dr. Maria Barbosa. I'm Trevor Tucker. This is Miss Janet McDonald, Mr. Andy Dance, and Miss Colin Conklin.
Welcome.
We have some other Christy Gavin's in the room. Should we introduce our technical folks?
Of course, we have a movie crew.
That's true. That's Jason Wheeler. He's in charge of information for us.
And he's a good driver.
Oh, so you met him then. All right.
Got you here safe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's right, I can attest to that.
Thank you for coming this morning and being with us. So we're going to go through it. Each of us are going to ask you one or two questions.
Okay.
And then from there, if there's any further follow-up questions from the board, we'll have those as well.
Okay.
But if you're ready, we'll get started.
Sure.
All right. First question this morning is, what do you consider the biggest accomplishment of your career to date, and why? And what is the one thing that you would have changed or done differently?
So when I think about accomplishments in my career, I kind of break it up between things that I was able to lead folks to do at the school level and things that I was able to get started at the district level. For me, it would be kind of a toss-up between the great success we had at Green Cove Junior with reaching subgroups, and then also I'm quite proud of the evaluation system that I put into place for Clay County principals. Let's stick with Green Cove Junior to label just one success. When I came to that middle school, it was one of those underperforming kind of groups where climate surveys said that teachers weren't happy. They were underperforming from where they should have been. Just to give you a little bit of background, Green Cove Junior has three main feeder schools, 3 elementaries, 2 extremely affluent elementaries, 2 of the highest affluent elementary in Clay County, and then the highest poverty elementary feeds in. Also the highest minority. And so you have this interesting mix then of kids that come into Green Cove Junior. And what I found for whatever reason was that staff had not yet connected the dots on how to reach every kid. It was one of those situations, like I think I referred to last night, where with your standard kid, your affluent kid, your high-achieving kid, Green Cove was getting great numbers, just like when we point to how Flagler is doing. But when we looked at subgroups, that's where Green Cove Junior was not getting it done. And then on top of that, I'm a big survey guy, and so I had put out surveys to the staff years ago, probably 10 years ago. I'm on a flight sitting next to a CEO, and she told me that the single greatest thing she had put into place was doing electronic surveys of her staff and anonymous surveys whenever she could, whenever it was possible, and that then using that information, it wouldn't just go into a black hole. She would then let the staff know, if she had a large corporation, let folks know how they felt, because it's one thing for someone to feel a certain way and to be like, everyone feels the way I do, but when you see the raw data and you go, okay, only actually 22% of people feel the way I do, it has a tendency to help people play a little nicer in the sandbox. And so I learned that from her. At the time, that survey company was called Zoomerang. They've gone out of business since they were swallowed up by SurveyMonkey. But so at every school where I've been the principal, which was 3, I brought surveying to that school, and then I brought it also at a little more limited model at the district level. And I put surveys out when I got to Green Cove Junior, and just asked some basic climate kind of questions. What do you need? Where are you being supported? What are our biggest challenges? All those kind of things like you would expect in a survey, but allowed them to have voice. And by Christmas, I'm pleased to report that we had turned, and I say we, it was a whole group effort, we had turned the climate and culture of that school around, where people were reporting being happy. Matter of fact, I remember the CEO had told me that they had kind of stumbled upon this question. There was this one great question that helped them get to culture and climate. And the question was, do you have a good friend at work? And she said, as simple as that question is, that was the single greatest predictor of whether you had employees who were invested and would stay or whether they were going to bolt on you. And I thought about it, I guess that's true. I guess I've never been happy at a job where I didn't have somebody that I considered a friend, and it made sense. So we turned the climate and culture around, and then when you look at the numbers at Green Cove Junior over the course of my 3 years there, it would be one of my proudest accomplishments. We had a 9% gain in math proficiency. We had a 10% gain in science proficiency, took the school to the all-time high of 66%. We actually had one of those years of gains. We had, the best I could tell, I looked back through records, it would be one of the top 5 gains in Clay County history as far as a school performing. And then I recently, this wasn't in my CV, I recently kind of took another look at that data to break down by subgroup, and I saw some other good numbers that I had missed when I put the CV together for this application. During my 3 years, we rose from a B to an A, but we saw a 17% gain in Hispanic math proficiency, 6% gain in African American math proficiency, a 15% gain in African American reading, and a 12% gain in Hispanic reading. And it was through focusing the school on data. All 3 schools that I came to, I actually was the first person to institute data meetings with the staff, where we would talk about what we were going to look at, what we were going to monitor. That old saying, what isn't monitored becomes the norm. And so I would help the staff see what we were holding important and what we were going to look at. And that process of communicating with the staff, I instituted a weekly email, and eventually I threw in pictures that I had taken from around the campus, fun things that had happened in classrooms that would start to reinforce the teaching techniques that I wanted to see and we were encouraging, and that linked up with the weekly professional development we were doing in the building to kind of reinforce, look what Mrs. So-and-so was doing in her class, and it just happened to be the technique we had worked on that week in professional development. So all of those things played together to get great gains at Green Cove Junior. When I think about a year where I didn't get it done, that would be as an assistant principal back 2005. My old boss and I had just looked at these numbers the other day, and that was an example of coming in. She was new to the building. I came in as her assistant principal, and we did a great job at hiring, at building up the culture. But when you look at the results, we missed the mark. That was back in the days of AYP, and we missed the mark in every single subgroup. It would AYP, no, AYP, no, all the way down the line. And so that would be an example of a time when I didn't get it done. And not that I should probably sit here and give you a list of times I didn't get it done, but another would be my first year as an assistant principal. When you're a brand new teacher, you're never going to be as good as you will be your second year. When you're a brand new assistant principal, same thing, principal, and I can only assume superintendent. My first year as an assistant principal, I think sometimes my interactions with parents, I don't think I quite had a full understanding yet of trying to create a win-win. I think I was on the phone thinking, well, I need to protect my principal, I need to defend, and I think I was, not all the time, but I think that sometimes I was not realizing that I need to get it to a win-win, and I'd misunderstand priorities. I would think the job I was doing as assistant principal was just the most important thing. I remember one time the principal was, had a faculty meeting, and she said, and Mr. Umbaugh has just finished inventory, and that's right. I announced to the faculty crowd, that's right. After spending lots of evenings and weekends, we have a 100% inventory report. You could have just heard a pin drop in the place, like nobody cared, and I went, oh, my priorities aren't what matters here. It's the priorities of the institution and what's important to these teachers and getting the job done. So every job, I have those learning experiences.
Thank you. The second question that I have for you. In what specific area do you feel you could have the greatest impact on Flagler County Public Schools? And how would you initiate that impact?
So I would start by focusing on our graduation rate in Flagler schools, as we're under the state average for the last 2 years. We're talking a third of a percentage point, a fourth of a percentage point, not talking a huge amount, but it's jarring to look and see Flagler schools now just underneath that state average. And the first step is bringing groups of people together and listening to them. I referenced this last night. My plan that is sitting in front of you, it is nothing more than just I'm going to bring this group of people together and listen. Then I'm going to get this group of people together and I'm going to listen. And guess what I'm going to do with this third group of people? I'm going to listen. And find out, what are we doing? What is there left to do? A graduation rate is a short and long-term complex issue, but I've called it before, and I really believe this, that our graduation rate is like the canary in the coal mine that tells us about the health of the whole system. And so when we have a graduation rate that is stagnating, or in this case now starting to dip below the gains that others are making, that's a wake-up call. Doesn't mean that we have to, I used the reference last night, I'm not saying the body needs open heart surgery, but we need some multivitamin, we got to find some place to give the steroid shot. So kind of the mantra that I'll be using is gather the information. That's what I'm doing, the listening. Gather the information from everyone who has anything to do with our education system. Because remember, a graduation rate, it's the health of the whole system, right? So gather the information. We'll go to work together as a board and superintendent and as a staff and as school teams, and then we'll start to get results. I mean, but there are real questions we have to have answered. What in the world is happening with Flagler boys? Flagler girls, 9.4% higher in graduation rate than Flagler boys. I'm not telling you I'm the guy coming in with all the answers. I'm just the guy coming in with some questions, right? And so we'll get together with people, we'll talk, we'll ask the right questions, and we'll go to work together.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Vance.
All right, mine deals with instructional leadership, and you've done a lot of homework, so I am confident that you've read the mission and vision. So as you know, innovation is part of that and something that we pride ourselves in. So the question being, Flagler Schools prides itself as an innovative educational leader and has been recognized nationally for our creative learning spaces, one-to-one initiative, and classroom-to-career flagship programs. If you could speak briefly about your knowledge of the programs and what innovative instructional practices you plan to promote as the chief instructional leader at Flagler Schools.
Certainly. So obviously, you folks a few years ago, you made the big splash with the one-to-one initiative, right? I mean, that's, as you've been implementing that now, but talking about it, and so that's been something that caught my eye. Of course, a couple districts away. I think when I look at where you are at, and I'm going to use words like we today, where we are at Flagler County Schools, I see, and unless I'm wrong, unless I get out there and listen and it turns out I'm wrong, I see a group of folks who are perfectly happy and excited about the four-pillar structure that's been set up. I've heard Mr. Oliva speak about it the last couple of years at some FASA events. I'm in the Florida Association of School Administrators, and I've heard Mr. Oliva speak. You'll notice actually on page 1 of the plan that I reference the 4 pillars, because I'm trying to give you the message that, look, I am not, to quote the song, I'm not going to come in like a wrecking ball, right? I'm going to come in, I'm going to listen, I'm going to see what's working, and then are there some areas that aren't. So my goals are to keep the 4-pillar structure, to listen to stakeholders, and look to meet those needs. When you think about servant leadership, it isn't about giving everybody everything what they want. It's everything that they need. I'm reading a book, not quite finished with it yet, that talks about servant leadership, and it's about a guy who went and he spent a week in a monastery and started to think about the essence of leadership, and it talks about the difference between power and authority, and that kind of an understanding is what I would be bringing. I wouldn't be coming to try to rule with power. It is authority where you are motivating people to look at the system and move ahead. So my goal would be to model and then expect servant leadership at all levels. So regardless of the initiative, regardless of whatever innovative approach we're taking, are we turning the pyramid upside down, and are we looking to meet the needs, not the wants, but the needs of that group we're serving, so that ultimately now it flows clear out to servant leadership, teachers and staff members, out to students, out to parents. It flows all the way. It's like an upside down pyramid. But truly, our graduation rate will tell us how we're doing. But when I start the kind of listening tour, whatever we call it, I'll try to come up with a fun name. When I start that process, I'll be fully transparent with the board, fully transparent with people out in our community, in our schools. Here's what we're finding out, right? Here's where we're at. Because even our best innovative approaches, they need to take a fresh look at it, right? I mean, one-to-one initiatives, I'm not saying anything about Flagler's one-to-one initiative, but one-to-one initiatives in general are famous for, we pour some money into technology, we get the technology out into classrooms, and then we figure that teachers will figure it out. And so our more tech-savvy teachers do figure it out quickly and start rocking right away. But then we have that whole group of folks who, you know what, it's not that I'm scared of technology, but I've done 20 years without it. Other than maybe having an Elmo or whatever, I don't know that I need it. And then we have other folks who, as soon as one time the technology doesn't work right in their classroom and they had to think on their feet and improvise, they're like, all right, I am never again using technology or this kind of technology. But in general, I'm a huge believer of technology in the classroom. 20 years ago, when I was a junior high teacher, I developed a website. I still own it today, whatarewedoingtoday.com, because it was the #1 question kids would have, what are we doing today, Mr. Umbaugh? And so I created a website, wawdt.com, where I would take our content, take things, get things on a screen, and then magically kids wanted to become more engaged with it. So I'm a big believer in outside-the-box thinking and in the interventions or the innovations that we're doing here. The idea of flagship schools, as you mentioned, where we are trying to create relevance all the way through. I mean, that's been at the heartbeat of what I've been looking at for the last 2 years, as we were attempting to go wall-to-wall academies in Clay. Just the academy concept is exactly what you folks have already been looking at, and Superintendent Oliva has brought that vision of connecting kids all the way through to a career pathway. Doesn't mean that when I'm in 3rd grade I have to choose that I'm going to be a doctor, but it's those soft skills that we can talk about that are the 21st century skills that are needed, so that a kid can go out and they know how to listen, they know how to present, they know how to critically think and problem solve and work in a group. Those kind of soft skills we can connect to any career pathway, and I think that things like flagship schools help us do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Barbosa, you're up.
I'm supposed to ask in regards about the business and finance.
Okay?
Okay, and the first question is, explain what you have learned in your years of experience with budgeting. What budget practice have been most effective and why?
So if I were to make a crude bumper sticker about what I have learned about budget finances, that bloat happens. Over the course of years, what happens, you get pieces of your budget in place, you get, be it allocations, whatever it is, and then those things become normal, and once you've put them into place, they become very, very difficult to undo without a very real human component. And so bloat happens, and over time, that's how you end up with your budget spiraling out of control, because in any of our school budgets, allocation costs are well over 80%. I know in Clay County, 88% are tied up in salaries. So when you're looking at a budget, that's that huge piece of pie on that pie chart, where if you don't take a look at allocations, you will never be able to get a budget where you want it, a reserve fund balance where you want it, teacher and staff raises. None of those things are possible if you don't get allocations under control. So number one, you've got to get staffed appropriately. You've got to understand the employee benefit costs, because that'll be the next big piece that you're dealing with. I was joking with someone last night when we were talking. They had just come from, an insurance committee meeting, and I said, boy, that is a thankless committee, because no matter what you come up with in the insurance meeting later, you get blamed. They're like, oh, I can't believe our premiums are going up. And what? So that is there are some gigs that are a little easier, like calendar committee, but we got a calendar committee. But the insurance committee, no one ever.
They're not around here.
No, it's even controversial with the calendar. Well, you see, for me, I always feel like I'm Santa on the calendar committee, because I'm like, and you will have a spring break. Thank you. You're right, and so you get to give. So you have to get benefits under control and understood, and then you have to agree on priorities. So as far as what I've learned about bloat happening, you've got to start fresh and examine each line from the beginning each year, and you pull your leadership together for tough choices. And probably the step that gets missed in districts all over America is you've got to communicate the why behind the tough choices that you've made. Sometimes you're going to have to make less than popular choices. Sometimes let's go ahead and speak as if I am one of you now, we will have to make tough choices sometimes. But the more communicating we do leads to more buy-in. The more real conversations we have out in schools where they can tell we're not just giving political speak, we're actually talking about, gosh, I'd love to be able to have more buses. However, when we have those tough conversations, it will start to earn a respect when people will see that we're not trying to pull wool over anyone's eyes, we're trying to be transparent. So budgeting, like every other element of being a good board member, being a good superintendent, is that it is relationship driven. And as we make relationships with the community and with our school and our schools, our school staffs, the relationships will drive us getting tough choices through and coming out the other side.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the second question is, what is the importance of the second and the third FTE count and why?
So all of our budgeting is a guess, right? When you look at essentially what is happening with how the budgeting process works, the reason that it is so nebulous is that it's based on a guess, right? So in the fall, I don't know how necessarily we do it in Flagler, but in Clay County, we put out to principals, okay, tell us what you've learned about the areas, about the neighborhoods, tell us who's coming, what are your projections for next year? And it always feels kind of funny as a principal, you're saying, I am just trying to get the school year started, and you're asking me about next year? So as we then are making those kind of projections, then those numbers by Christmas time are rolling over to Tallahassee, and now the legislature are using those numbers because now they're playing around with numbers and they're trying to figure out your base student allocation and what they can afford, and they're also trying to take a look also at population shifts. And so what happens then with your second and your third, you are now starting to get the actual, the pie is starting to, the crust is starting to harden, right? You're starting to see a little clearer on what your numbers are and what you can afford. But the whole thing, the backbone of your budget is based on the FTE guesswork that you're doing ahead of time, and then you hold your breath as kids are showing up through the door, and you get your first count, and as you're watching, and then as you get closer to Christmas, you're seeing the shifts, and then basically by springtime is when you're finally starting to guess on exactly where those numbers are coming out, and sometimes then they surprise you with the base student allocation, and you're like, all right, they're giving us a little more money per base student allocation, but as we all know, Tallahassee isn't in the business of making the school districts rich, and so it is very much a kind of a tenuous kind of relationship where you are trying not to overshoot your projection.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
Ms. McDonald.
Yeah,
You're up.
thank you. So, good morning.
Hi.
We're going to have a focus on board, staff, and community relationships.
Okay.
So, easy first. Please define the customer that public schools serve and how the highest degree of customer satisfaction can be reached.
So,
Achieved.
okay. So I referenced it a little bit in an earlier answer, in that our customers are students and their parents, guardians. I mean, that's ultimately who our customer is. Servant leadership, as I said, defines needs and then looks to meet them. because sometimes I think people misunderstand when you talk about servant leadership, and they will say, well, you can't just lay down, you can't just be a doormat, right? You can't just cave to everyone. But I think that where you have the distinction between wants and needs is where servant leadership can help us give better customer satisfaction, of trying to figure out what each group of stakeholder needs so that their satisfaction can be likely, creating win-win kind of scenarios. Like when I talked about, what I did a lousy job of in my first year as an assistant principal, of that realizing that it's not about me winning a conversation, it's about creating a win-win, that they can come away as satisfied as possible. I mean, let's face it, on this job, even those of us who are newer to this job, you have disappointed someone, right? They've called you, they've emailed you that I want you to take a look at this. This is out of control, right? And so you then have gone and investigated or reached out to a principal, and you've kind of done your homework, and then you came to find out, well, there's actually about 37 sides to that story I was checking out, and it maybe isn't quite as, exactly as the person gave it to you. And so when you then report back to that person, you've been in that situation where you're not going to give them exactly what they want, because what they want is that principal's head on a platter or whatever it is in that moment, right? You're not going to give them exactly what they want. And so then it becomes this dance, no pun intended, becomes this dance to be able to meet them somewhere in the middle where they can see that you tried, they can see that you listened to them, and that you have they and their child's best interests at heart. With every student and every parent, if throughout our system we look to meet their needs, not their wants, but their needs, I think that propels Flagler County Schools to being a customer service organization. I got a buddy who always jokes that one day he's going to write a book, and now I'm putting it on the internet so someone else will steal the book, but he's always joking he's going to write a book called Customer No Service. When he goes into a store and something happens, and that's not customer, that was customer no service. And really, truly, especially in this day and age, I heard Ms. Conklin give the update at your board meeting Tuesday night. Look, those bills that are coming down the pike, even if they get altered quite a bit, look, we are in Florida, really across the nation, very much at a time where charter schools and competition are just, that's the way that legislators want to try to fix the challenges that are in education nationwide. And in Florida, they've really bought into it. And so, you know what, we can fight it kicking and screaming if we want, or we can say, you know what, fine, let's find ways where we make our product better than anyone else's. And that would be my job as your superintendent, to make our choice better than all the other choices. So you don't have to be anti-school choice. Sure, I'm school choice, but it's my job, it's our job as a board and superintendent to make our public schools the best choice. And part of the way you do that is through great customer service.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, a bigger, more convoluted question.
Can you not do a second easy question? Is that not allowed?
Well, there's so much to find out,
Yeah.
and so much going on. So in relation to community relationships, and I will repeat any part of this if
Great.
you feel comfortable going back, because it's kind of a three-parter. So we have a pretty unique challenge right now in Flagler with two executive leaders with deep institutional knowledge, finding other opportunities.
Yes.
And so one of the challenges will be, if selected, what would be your plan for filling the Director of Leadership position in context of the question of how would you build and facilitate a collaborative and trusting relationship with and among board members, school and district level leaders, teachers, support staff, parents, students, business leaders, and the community as a whole. So in addition to our specific need, could you give us some examples of your prior experience and success with building and facilitating those relationships with any and all of the, or all of the groups that were kind of listed?
Sure.
Thank you.
We'll be here till midnight. That's
There
a 14-part question.
Thank you.
So part of what, no offense, you are going to hear me like a broken record, and I can only assume tomorrow will be the same way as we have our individual interviews. I want to be as clear as I can that I don't mean it as a cop-out when I tell you that I need to listen to the needs out there. Because I think the most obnoxious thing that or whether you choose Mr. Tager, you choose Dr. Wilson, whichever of the three of us that you choose, the worst thing we could come in and say is, I got it figured out. Here's what we're going to do. That wouldn't go over well with anyone. So I've got to come in and listen to groups. I've got to listen to individuals. I've got to survey our stakeholders. I need to pull our stakeholders together and see the whites of their eyes. I need to talk to people about their needs. For instance, because it's easy to make assumptions that aren't true, and you need survey data, you need discussions, and people need to be able to be anonymous to give their input sometimes, because otherwise they're scared. I don't know if you took the time, but I did, to read, you've got it posted on your website, on the superintendent search page, over on the documents and forms, and there are the survey results, what the folks want, right? And you've got about 300, I think, folks who responded, 100 staff, you've got parents, you've got community and business. And there are 9 pages, single-spaced, of, hey, this is the stuff that Flagler County is doing well. And hey, yeah, we're excited about this. But there are 14 pages of, now we need to look at this, right? So survey results, like nothing else, help us see that it's not as cut and dry as what it appears to the eye, right? I've got to walk that fine line. You notice in the transition plan that I give you, look, the whole first page is, look, I'm going to come in, I'm going to ease into what we've got here. I'm not trying to be radical in the approach, but we need to get survey data and see how do people really feel. Because I'm telling you, if I saw it once, I saw it 20 times in the 14 pages of challenges of folks saying we need to watch the good old boy network here. I don't have any comment on that. I'm just telling you it's in there, and it's a recurring theme. So I think we have to be careful when we just assume we know what people think, because the people in our circles tell us what they think, and so then it reinforces what we think. So survey data is the best way for us to find out, system-wide, does this back up my preconceived notions or does it not? And I will come back to the board and I'll say, here's where people are at with this. Right? Because on one hand, it would be easy to believe, look, absolutely, the people are crying out that when you reference the leadership position we have for Mr. Orndorff leaving. And by the way, can I say, love Vernon Orndorff. He and I are on a FAFSA board together. You can't find a nicer guy in the world. But it would be easy enough to think, okay, well, now the people in my circles tell me we have to have an internal candidate for this. We have to have an internal candidate. Whereas other folks, our voices saying, oh, please consider from the outside, please take a fresh look at this. And what I can tell you is I would follow the proper rules of human resources and say, Mr. Oliva had asked me that question. He said, have you had any thoughts? I said, well, it's a little putting the cart before the horse, right? A little putting the cart before the horse. I would hate to assume I've got the job, but it is a very real concern because Mr. Orndorff is leaving us May 1st, right? First major decision that I would need to make. And certainly, Ms. McDonald, I have people that I have worked with over the last 19 years that I know could do the job. But does that mean that I'm laser locked in on them? No. I would talk to any interested qualified candidate, and I would try to come out with the best person to help propel us forward. So it's listening sessions. For all those groups you mentioned, school district level leaders, teachers, you said support staff, right? You said I think business leaders, community. And then I referenced this earlier. I think nothing helps you more than a clear communication of the whys, the why that you do something. It's when a leader or a board, a leadership team, it's when something feels like a decree that then people feel like something's done to them, and then you might have compliance out in the trenches, but you don't have people actually on the same page. And that's when you're not going to move ahead. That's when you're going to stagnate because you just have compliance. So listening builds trusting relationships. And like I mentioned, with the Green Cove Junior climate survey, by Christmas started to come back. When people see that their input isn't just going off into a black hole, but you're actually taking the input, you're communicating back out to the stakeholders, you're saying how people feel, and you're making very real, noticeable changes in policy or procedure based on how they feel, that goes a long way. One of the first things I did as a district leader was set up meeting schedules where I could meet with my closest directors, but then also I could bring people together who had not traditionally been at the table, bring them together monthly, and go around the table. Tell me how you're feeling. Tell me what you're struggling with. Do you have a problem that this group can solve? So there's one thing I hate. It's like faculty meetings where we're just informational, and then we're going to have the bake sale, and then we're going to, right? Instead, our meetings should be problem solving. It's just like what you guys are doing at your workshops. It should be problem solving. Let's kick it around, and let's let every voice be heard, especially those folks who maybe have not traditionally been allowed a clear voice at the table before. Did I answer most pieces of your question?
I believe so. Would you like to hear it again?
Yeah, no, I'll repeat it back to you. It's like,
No,
yeah.
that's okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald.
Okay.
Ms. Conklin.
Thank you, sir. Okay, my area of questions will focus on performance accountability.
All right.
So the first question is, there's been a lot of controversy around some of these issues, but what are your views on state and national accountability programs? What is your role and value of assessment instruments in school systems today? And what types of assessments do you believe are most effective and why? And I'll repeat any pieces that you need me to repeat. So the first part is, what are your views on state and national accountability programs?
So government accountability programs have had unintended consequences, I think, of over-testing kids. We had No Child Left Behind, and we're at the point of no child left untested at this point, right? And artificial measuring of teachers, it has to be reined in. I'm a fan of high standards for our kids, emphasizing critical thinking, 21st century skills, like I mentioned earlier. But I'm not a fan of this corporate industry that has developed around testing. When people start making money on our kids, that's where you always have to take a closer look. So you step back at the basics and you say, what do we want our kids to be able to know and do? Because assessing is right when done in right measure and done the right way. So tightly aligned, frequent, formative assessments to drive our instruction. Things that great teachers have been doing since the earth cooled, where you are seeing where your kids are at, and you're making decisions on who can move on in content and who do I need to pull over to the side in a group and actually give some remedial instruction while I'm having some enrichment for this group, and now this group is reinforcing basic standards. Teachers can adjust their groups of kids that got it and didn't get it with those quicker, formative kind of assessments. Now, summatives have their place, okay? Where summatives where you look at a learning over a longer course of time, kind of a summary of your learning. But it should be, your best summative assessments should be collaboratively designed by teachers so that every section of your course results in the same learning, right? What you don't want is a couple different sections of physics, and they had one test, they had a completely different test, and it was all kind of on the whim of the instructor. You want folks to be collaborative. Last year, I spoke in front of the House, or I guess it was Senate K-12 Education Committee, because it was Senator Legg sitting in front of me, on this issue, on this very issue. And I made a couple of points. One was, we've got to rein in the testing. Please take a look at all of these assessments you put out there. We don't need all of these. Let us control it at the local level and also in our classrooms. There certainly are some things that statewide, I understand, accountability isn't a bad thing. You want to have the dipstick check the oil, see where we're at, that's fine. But we are stopping the car every 3 miles to check the oil, right? Whereas we're just trying to get to Chicago. So we just have to rein it in. So when I spoke to Senator Legg, I made that point, and I also made the point that this insistence on computerized testing, because they wanted quicker results. So it was like anything, right? It was a good intention. They wanted quicker results. Everyone wants quicker results. But now you're tying up your computer labs for months at a time. Now, that might not be the case in Flagler's who are going one-to-one or are already one-to-one in places where then they can test right where they are. But in most places in Florida, we're having to shut down computer labs for months at a time so that we can cycle kids through and do their testing. And now those labs can't be used for reference and research and all the other cool things that we want to use computers for. And so the other point I made was, look, whatever testing you're going to end up putting in place. Can we please go back to paper and pencil, or at least having a district having that paper and pencil option? Because I think that that's important. So I'd be proud to fight as Flagler's superintendent that enough is enough. Let's bring some sanity back into state and federal accountability.
Great, thank you. The next part of that is, what is the role and value of assessment instruments in a school system today?
So I tried to answer that in that answer. Let me go back. The role, I think, is you have to check where kids are, right? You determine what do we want our kids to be able to know and do, and then we have to actually check and see, can they know and do it? So the role of assessment is to drive your instruction, the best role. Now, you have some summative assessments at the end of the say, hey, how did we do? How did we do? But essentially, the most important assessments are to find out where kids are at and to drive our instructions so that then we can have remediation and we can have enrichment and acceleration for those kids who got that standard. We don't need to keep hitting that standard with that kid.
And do you feel comfortable that you've kind of covered the last part? What types of assessments are most effective and why?
I think so. I feel like formative are the most important. I think summative have their place. But when it comes to high stakes testing, I think that they are not a bad thing, but we have to rein them way in. They should be a much more limited basis than what they are today. And we certainly need to look at double testing. When we're testing in a couple of different ways, let's rein it in and just have one exam on something.
Okay, great. Thank you. The last question in this area is, what measures do you look to when determining the success or failure of programs in a district?
So first, I think you have to look at student achievement data. And when you reference my plan, and please let me be clear, and especially since you have members of the press here and everything, let me be clear that I did not title it an action plan. This is not Jeff Umbaugh coming in and he has all the answers. This is a transition plan. I love what you and Mr. Oliva have put into place. I'm just trying to help us transition to the next step. When you look at this plan, you're going to see some pages of data, 2 pages of data. And you're going to see things that jumped out at me on the page from student data as I dug into Flagler. And I say, hey, here's some things we're doing well. Here's some things that we're going to need to ask questions about and find out more about, okay? So you're going to see that throughout the plan. And if we have time at the end, if you want me to step through pages of the plan, I'd be happy to do that. But I think student achievement data is the first thing, the first measure you look at to help you determine how are things going. I think next it's stakeholder input, because we like to assume that because we have a big shiny initiative that everything is great. And unless you actually allow the people in the trenches to tell you how it's going, right? Unless we reach out to teachers and say, okay, have you had enough training in the one-to-one initiative? Have you had enough training to know how to implement those iPads in your classroom? Or what are some sites you can use and how do you use them with these MacBook Airs that you have? Until we start getting stakeholder input, we are truly flying blind. So you have to have stakeholder input to determine how programs are doing in your district. And then honestly, let's just call a spade a spade. You have to have a cost-benefit analysis, right? Like famous people have said, we can do anything we want with this budget, but we just can't do everything. And so we've got to prioritize. We have to decide where we get the most bang for our buck and how we're going to be able to drive our district forward. Because there are some big, shiny, expensive programs that if we divert amounts of money into it, we might be able to do, but then we're leaving some other things in the lurch over here. So we've got to prioritize. We have to look at how much things cost compared to how much success, what our stakeholders say on whether or not it's a successful program, and what our data says. So you have to take all of those things into account. It's the ugly side of it, right? We all wish I've spoken to a couple superintendents who are now long since retired, but they were superintendents in Florida when times were a little more flush with money, and they said it was a great job. When you had lots of money, it was a great job. You could say, we're going to solve this problem, and we're going to send some dollars that way, and you didn't have to sacrifice. You didn't have to rob Peter to pay Paul. But we're not in those times, and so we have to prioritize. We have to make decisions together as a board and superintendent and do cost-benefit analysis on what programs are working.
Great, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we appreciate you coming. Do you have any closing comments, or would you like to tell the board anything else?
Well, yeah, I told a story last night, and I think I want to end, unless you would like me to step through the plan, I'd like to, I think, end with a story. I told you the story last night about how my unique needs were, differentiated, for, and how then my third grade teacher had said, well, that kid's going to either end up in prison or president of the United States. And so it was quite the fork in the road that she presented to my mom at a parent conference, but it was because my needs were met that then I was able to go on and be successful. And so I want to fast forward now to the data that I mentioned last night at the community forum, where in Flagler schools, we have some great data, right? 13th this last night, 13th in language arts achievement out of 67 districts. But when you look at the lower quartile learning gains, 41st. So we're struggling with reaching our strugglers, and math the same way. 16th in math achievement, that's fantastic, 16th out of 67, but 36th in math lower quartile learning gains. There are some places that jump out at you. You think, my gosh, we've got to do better. Industry certifications, good grief. Flagler County, 59th out of 67. That alone could help us get the A. Now, it's lagging data. It'll take 2 years once we get it fixed. But there are very real areas for us to look at where we're leaving points on the table. And when I think about reaching our strugglers, because industry certifications is a perfect example of hooking kids with relevance in school. Now I have a very real thing I'm learning to help connect me to career pathway. You're doing a great thing with this classrooms to careers initiative and stuff like that, where the stakeholders like it and you like it. Is just about making it better, right? It's just about giving it a shot of steroids to make that program even better, because our strugglers, we will reach our strugglers with things like industry certifications, where they say, now that I can latch on to. I don't know if I'm going to college, but I know that Microsoft Office certification will help me in any job that I go into, right? I know that if I get into coding, I know that computer science touches every single part now, every single job. So when I told you the story last night about reaching, or about myself kind of being a struggler, trying to find my place in school, because I just felt like my place in school was just to make my friends laugh there, right? And then in about 5th grade, it changed for me when I understood that there was maybe a different path. When I interviewed back in 1998 for my first teaching job at Wilkinson Junior High in Middleburg, Florida, which I think Mr. Wheeler will tell you I'm actually supposed to say scenic Middleburg, Florida. When I interviewed for the job with legendary Clay County Principal Ed Polk, it was for a run-of-the-mill social studies position. We were already behind the 8 ball as teachers were returning to work the very next day, so Mr. Polk took a chance on me. Magically, by the time I showed up for work, the run-of-the-mill social studies teaching position was now a dropout prevention social studies teaching position. It's funny how that happens. It's working with kids who were all at least 1 or 2 years behind their classmates. Most were on the verge of shaving and driving to middle school. I was an alternatively certified teacher. So I had actually gone to school to be a preacher. All right, Mr. Wheeler and I were talking about this. I'm kind of an occupational mutt. I had worked at a dozen radio stations for a while. I thought that's what I wanted to do. I thought I was going into the ministry. I thought maybe journalism. There were a lot of things that I had looked at and a lot of interest I had. And eventually I started to feel like my calling wasn't preaching, it was teaching. God didn't dial the wrong number, I just misheard. So I hadn't done any student teaching because I was alternatively certified. And the last time I personally had been in a junior high classroom, I was a junior high student 15 years earlier, right? And so I remember looking out at that class the first morning, and it reminded me, you remember the old Welcome Back Cotter classroom? Mm-hmm. That's what it reminded me of, because here was a whole class of Jeffs with their only care in the world of just being a contest of who could make the other one laugh the hardest, right? And so I had my work cut out for me with that group. And it was the first time in my life where I had taken a job that I wasn't sure that I could do. And night after night, I slept in the fetal position. I'm not kidding, man. I found it hard to eat. I just wasn't hungry for the first time in my life. I lost 20 pounds from a frame that probably could barely stand to lose 10 at the time. I just kept picturing that class of kids and wondering if they realized that if they all just banded together, they could overtake me in a coup. Yeah, just wrap me in duct tape. I had visions of just begging for water, maybe some tater tots from the cafeteria for nourishment. So I had a decision to make. There were other jobs out there. There were even other teaching positions that maybe I could have been better suited for in the immediate short term. But I stuck it out, and I looked at it as a puzzle to solve. And what I found was that genuine connections to kids began to put those puzzle pieces into place. There's a book I love, a work I love called A Framework for Understanding Poverty by Ruby Payne. And in there she quotes a Yale professor named James Comer. And he has this great quote, which is, "No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship." And without fully understanding the theory behind what I was doing, or even the mechanics of how it was suddenly working, it was relationship building that began to make all of the difference in that classroom. Suddenly the toughest boys saw it was safe to laugh with the teacher, not always at the teacher. And the toughest girls saw that one of the first caring adult males treated each of them with respect. We had an acceleration option in that classroom, so in 1 year a kid could do 2 years worth of work. We would bump you from 7th to 8th grade at Christmas time. But at first they weren't caring about that. But suddenly it became cool to care. And my class became overachievers of all the dropout prevention sections there at Wilkinson Junior High. And most successfully made that jump, because there were some tough tests we had in the middle of the year to prove they could do it. Most made the jump to 8th grade that year. And you know, every bit of research says that the more retentions that a young person has, they become far more, exponentially more likely to drop out of school with each retention that they have. So that class of kids that year multiplied their chances of graduating and getting their lives back on track simply by buckling down, taking their education seriously for the first time probably for most of them. A caring adult had made all the difference to that group of kids. And that is why I do what I do. With a servant's heart, I want to lead alongside with you. I want to lead a whole system of caring adults dedicated to forming significant relationships with our 13,000 kids. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
very much.
And you know where you're going? You're getting a tour and everything?
Yeah, they're going to lead me around by the nose. That's fine.
All
It's like a
right.
cruise. I love that.
If we could just have one little walkthrough with
Yeah.
you as a group.
I think that would be awesome, because you did put an awful lot of effort into this, and I appreciate it.
Let's start.
as
Before we
well.
leave the cover, I want you to notice both high schools represented.
Yeah, smart man.
Okay, both high schools represented, throwing their
The
caps in
green
the
and
air,
We're
all
not a
right?
little competitive.
Yes, I figured if it's anything like our 7 high schools in Clay County, if I had only put one on the cover, I would never hear the end of it 10 years later as your superintendent. Okay, so on the first page, I guess all that I want you to notice is that first of all, that the 4 pillars shows up there. I'm just trying to communicate to you that just because an idea existed before I got here does not mean I don't need to change it. My ego is not such that every idea, every structure has to be mine, okay? If the board likes this structure, then guess what structure we're continuing with, all right? So that's all I'm trying to communicate to you. And I'm also showing kind of the guiding questions. These are the questions that I used when I took over all 41 evaluations for all 41 Clay County principals. What I did was at their pre-evaluation conference in the summer, I asked them 3 questions, and it ended up being the best 3 questions. And I stole this from someone. I saw a superintendent speak once, I think, at a FASA event. The 3 questions: what's going well? And this one's the best. What isn't going well? Because sometimes principals don't want to tell you that. And third, what areas do we want to target for change? And so those questions will drive, okay, the listening that we do. So then your next 2 pages are just items that jumped out at me from your data. There certainly are other items that, you know, that would be there. These are just things that I identified. I tried to do what any good teacher does, right? Put some strengths in there, because I understand that this plan will become public knowledge out there. I am not coming in trying to say that Flagler has huge problems to fix. Just every district, every school district has areas to focus. These are where I have identified. All right, so that's the next 2 pages. And then you notice on grad rate and acceleration on that second page, I think there are some real challenges there where truly that's where the rubber hits the road. Okay. As you turn to the 4th page, I want you to notice the quote at the top. I just love that quote. Matter of fact, I made this whole page just because I like that quote so much. We tend to overvalue the things we can measure and undervalue the things we cannot. And so on that page, I want you to see that I'm not just a data guy, right? I know I've talked a lot about data this morning, but I'm not just Sheldon Cooper coming in saying, look, this is what we have to do, and this is definitely what you're going to. I'm telling you, it's about relationships, it's about connecting with people, and these are some other questions that need to be answered that maybe the data wouldn't tell you, okay? And then page 5 is kind of an overview of where we go from here. And what you'll notice is focus 1 is all about listening to different people, right? Board members, administrators, teachers, support staff, public, okay? Your other focuses, focus 2, 3, and 4, are all tied to one of your 4 pillars, okay? So focus 2 ties to leadership development, to teaching and learning. Focus 3 ties to instructional innovation and operation, and focus 4 ties to your community engagement pillar. And then what you have is just a fleshed out page for each one of those focuses. Is focuses the right plural? Foci? I don't know. Focuses. Focus 1 has its page. Focus 2 has its page. And what you are seeing there are just the kind of steps I'd be taking to try to get to know the system. Let me say it again very clearly. If the board hates this plan, the board I have no problem with it. The plan goes in the trash, all right? It cost me all of $10 to make each one of these, okay? It's not a problem. This was just my attempt at trying to set up some kind of protocol for how I could help us get at the information that we need, okay? So that's your focus 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then on the last page is just simply some final thoughts where I kind of mentioned that, look, there are only 3 districts in Florida that are happy this year, right? 3 A districts, right? Everybody else has had to answer to their public, had to answer to the press, had to deal with things. And it's because Florida just raised the bar. They do that sometimes, and typically we kind of stagnate, we stumble, and then we see what are the new things that are being measured, and we move ahead. And so that's all I'm telling you on the final thoughts, that look, it's not the end of the world. By listening, by joining together with you folks, we can get this done, we can move on to the next level. But I want to commend the work that this board has done and that Superintendent Oliva has done. And like I said, I've known Vernon Orndorff for years, where I like him very much. You have some very good people in the system, and I think it spoke to it at your workshops, where you had person after person get up and go, can't we talk to an internal candidate? Can't we open it back up to an internal candidate? And I was watching on the computer, and I felt for him. I get it, because that did not strike me negatively at all, because I think, well, good for them. They have pride in their system. They like the direction that they're headed. These folks are vested. And I guess the only point I want to make is Vernon Orndorff had a day 1, right? He came here, Kansas, Texas. Vernon Orndorff had a day 1 12, 13 years ago. And I'm a big believer that if you give me a chance to have a day 1 here, by Christmas, people are going to start to forget I was ever an external candidate. And a year from now, they're going to be like, Umbaugh, yeah, hadn't you been in Flagler forever? I will do my best to assimilate. I will adjust to you. You won't have to adjust to me. Let me come in, join hands with you, and let's get the work done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you, I'm sorry, hi, Mom. Just, I know she.
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, great. Thank
Check
you.
out the
Thank you.
pictures,
Enjoy your
me, I'm
tour.
just saying. That's good.
I should say hi to Dad, too. But
Moms.